Welcome to Peer Check. I'm your host, Adam Keating, and today we're talking about why relationships are so important in helping you progress throughout your engineering career. My guest is Leila Kiradpur. She's a mechanical engineer who's done it all, from working in foundries and space to medical devices all across Canada. Welcome to the show, Leila.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's excited to
Leila,
be here.
we talked a lot about like the different industries you've played in, the roles you've played. You've seen it all at this point, and you've learned a lot of lessons about how to be a really good people mentor, coach, and also like ally to figure out how to make real change happen in these companies. How did you know that going into leadership was the right step for you? Like, why not individual contributor? At what point did you figure that out in your journey?
Well, Adam, let me tell you that it was not necessarily a switch that turned for me at some point of my career, say at 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years. It was probably a collection of my experiences from day one being a foundry and demonstrating leadership, managing myself, managing small tasks, and thinking that down the road I want to be able to manage bigger and greater things. And I didn't know what that looked like. And moving forward over the past number of years, it's humbling to think that I've lived through it all, but I've had some great opportunities to manage projects and teams, and I've had that great opportunity. And I don't know if I ever knew this is the right time I'm gonna get into it. It's just sort of like hindsight. You look back in the mirror and say, "Oh, I'm here. I've arrived." But you never know that you've absolutely there yet, and it's always work in progress. So there was no particular moment, and I don't know if I have arrived yet.
Do you feel like there's like an intrinsic part of who you are as a person that drove you to this like leadership mindset, even from day one, even if it was just intrinsic and self-starting? Do you feel like that's just part of who you were from day one?
Perhaps knowing these sort of things, I didn't think about them when I was 20 something years old coming out of university thinking that I'm a leader. I'm thinking that certain things, it's a process of elimination more than anything else. It was for me, and it has been. So at that point when I was younger, I was sort of like felt like I don't like doing this. I like a bigger picture. I like to see what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
how things are coming together, and how do I get involved with that. So I didn't realize that, and it just gradually, it's like when a sculptor is working on something in the beginning, it just looks like nothing, and eventually it forms itself, that piece of art. And um, and I think it just took time for me to
Mm-hmm.
see what I like, what I don't like to do. And even 20 plus years working, I sometimes still question that, but I s- but I have now a database of experiences to go back to and say, I've done this and that. They're great. I did well, or I didn't do so well in something else, compared to right out of university and so green and not knowing anything.
When you first took that jump, like I mean, you started as an engineer, you were acting as a leader sort of just by nature. What do you think it was that, your first manager or even your second manager would have saw in you that said, "Hey, I think Layla's ready for that." What was this stood out? Because I think a lot of people wonder, what is it? What's the difference between being a leader in a role where you're managing people and teams and that kind of stuff, and then being a technical leader, being a subject matter expert? It's a very different career path. What do you think they saw in you that said, okay, hey, there's a real opportunity here for her to take that team and go run with it?
Adam, that's absolutely correct. A technical leader who has technical expertise is a very different than a people manager, and I've often seen that we combine the two, and someone may be very good technically, and we say, okay, while you're at it, here are about
Mm-hmm.
15 people, engineers, just manage them, just tell them what to do. So I think it was more so in my experience. I've had managers and team leads who recognized that I was and I was clueless in the beginning, and I still, as I said, I question my own capabilities time to time. It's like, am I doing the right job, the good enough job? But someone at any given time recognized that I can do it. I can manage the efforts in a team. It could be a team of one or 15,
Hmm.
but like they stood back and they were either my direct manager or indirect, and but they were observing, they were seeing what's going on, and
Hmm.
they trusted that process within themselves, and they were able to give me the green light to
Hmm.
proceed and to take that leap and going from an individual contributor to a manager.
And it's almost like, and I say this to my team today, it's like a lot of times leadership, it's not a title, right? Leadership is not a title. Leadership is how you behave. And oftentimes, the most important part is that example you set. Even when you are a leader, it's more about what you do than anything else that really sets that pace. Do you find that now that you're in those like leadership roles yourself, that you're seeing the same thing in your team? That you're noticing, someone new coming in, they're super hungry, but it's not that they're saying they want to be a manager, it's that you can picture them doing that because of the way they're acting. Is that what you see today now, just on the other side of the table?
I've always been observing teams that I work with, and I like to think that I'm good at recognizing in more recent years. I mean, it takes experience um, to recognize talent, and that talent could
Hmm.
be a technical talent, it could be a people management talent, and again, recognizing that a particular individual is really good at being a technical lead, but for heaven's sake, don't give him or give her an individual or two to manage because it just ruins their days. So it's a matter of recognizing that, and I'm always looking for those opportunities because what I love to do more than anything else in a company environment is building teams. And teams are
Hmm.
not static. They teams come and go. You could have a project team, and the project could run for 6 months or 6 years or 6 weeks.
Hmm.
So you could have a team assembling, come together. They need to work together. They need to function together, and they dissipate again. So finding the right personalities is critical. Sometimes we don't have that opportunity. We say, okay, I need an electrical, I need a mechanical, and you sort of like you have to pick and choose from that list. But then, how do you make the chemistry? How do you make the dynamics of
Hmm.
that work? And that's critical.
When you see those like two types of leaders you're talking about there now, is there a certain set of like characteristics in the people leader that are really obvious to you that say, okay, that's the person who leads the team versus that's the subject matter expert? Is there a couple of characteristics that come to mind?
Um, yes, you can quickly, I would say, judge individuals to say, oh, this person is a big picture individual. He or she, they're perfect to be in a leadership role.
Hmm.
But definitely, it's seeing the big picture, being visionary, and I've experienced that myself. Going from a manager to a director role, thinking now I need to dream and have a vision
Hmm.
and not just thinking about, okay, here's the technical problem that I need to solve with my team. I need to
Hmm.
think about, okay, this is it's like a Lego set.
Yeah.
This component of it, but what does this fit into the whole assembly? And
Hmm.
what does the whole thing look like? And when it starts moving, what part is going to play? So I guess I look for in that sense, I'm always trying to see are the individuals looking at the big picture? Are they thinking beyond their own circle of
Hmm.
comfort? A technical comfort could be like someone who loves to just write Python coding and that's all they want to do. And they don't want to think about the long-term path for the organization. And every individual is wired and has different interests, and we got to be conscious of that for sure.
I agree totally. I think that's a really good way to look at it. Like with the broader, are they thinking outside of their immediate scope? Like if that's where the brain tends to go, and they're thinking about how people fit together and cross functional work requirements, what this actually means. I always think about it as like the why. It's some people are really good at the how, but the why is really important. Why are we doing this? Should we be doing this? Diving into those questions, and you start to see it. Like we've worked with some folks who are fresh out of school, and the first day they start working with me, the questions they ask are just so rich in what they actually are thinking about. But that's super exciting. I'm actually interested, given you've done sort of the management role, director, like looking at programs. What do you think is the biggest difference between being a good manager and a good director? Like, what is that step? There's lots of folks now that are thinking about that as managers. How do I go to the next place? What do you think you need to prove to take that next step in your career?
Right. Let me say something first, that every organization has its own sort of leadership characteristics. So, a manager of an engineering team in one organization could have a lot more responsibility than a director at another organization.
Hmm.
So, and one thing I'd like your listeners to really focus on is that progression in their careers should not be linear. And it could be a zigzag path of one day you take a few steps up and then you take a step
Hmm.
down. It's like a snake and ladder game.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, it's like, are you having fun? Are you
Yeah.
enjoying it? Are you learning? Are you learning? And that's the key.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say for my own immediate experiences when I'm thinking about that, going from a manager of a product development team, engineering team, going to more of a director role, it's sort of like it's like being in the forest and you're coming up, you're in a drone, you're in a
Yeah.
helicopter, and you're coming up and you're seeing the forest. You know, as an individual contributor, you're right at the between the trees,
Hmm.
and you eventually find your way up, and you're looking at the big picture. And and I think that's a big difference. Your point of view changes in within the organization, and the decisions that I had to make reflected my view because now I knew what was going on with certain things that I didn't know before. I knew about some of the challenges, some of the wins and opportunities, and trying to then, as I said, be a visionary. And rather than my previous manager saying, okay, here's the vision for the department, and you have a
Hmm.
team in that department, I had to dream and have a vision for that department. And then the challenge starts.
Yeah.
How do you have sponsors and champions to help you execute on that?
I,
So,
I really like the analogy of the forest. It's like I can almost picture like the individual contributors. We talk about rabbit holes, but like you're right there at the roots, right? You're right at the roots of the tree. As a manager, you're somewhere in the branches, tangled up in sort of everything, and the director, you're sort of seeing over the top what's happening. I think that's a really good analogy. What do you think's been the hardest? Like I think you just said it then, looking for sponsors, dealing with challenges. What do you think's been the hardest part in shifting from manager, where you had your hands sort of still pretty close to engineering, to director where you're really thinking big picture? What did you find the most difficult in making that switch?
it's a transition. And sometimes it happens very rapidly, and we need to, if, for someone who's in that situation, they need to adjust how they're looking through that lens. And I
Hmm.
had to do that, and I had to think about, okay, I'm itching to do this. I want to do this myself, but I need to delegate. And that's the
Hmm.
key. That's
Yeah.
the key when anybody enters any type of management, any managerial supervision, any leadership role, to how to have a trust relationship, really build that trust in their team, in their
Hmm.
department, so they can say, I'm not going to do this anymore. This work that I know, I know, there's no nothing wrong with that. Absolutely, they can do it, but there are bigger things. There's tasks that the rest of the team can't do. So for me, it was like I need to change my mindset. I need to think about the bigger picture. Decisions that I make now will impact more than one individual.
Hmm.
It impacts everyone. And then the relationship with the department, with other departments, and at the end of the day, users, clients, patients, and it was just the impact was greater.
Hmm.
And it was just it took some time for me to change that mindset, but and also trust myself that I'm on the right path. I can do this.
And after doing sort of each of these roles now, I think you said something a few minutes ago where you said, it's about having fun and about challenging yourself and about learning and contributing, right? Where do you find yourself happiest? Like I think about even my role, I'm the CEO of Colab today. I really love product. I could totally see myself spending, in another life, a ton of time in product. I've learned that now from doing sort of bits every role. What have you found that you love the most? Is it a certain role or a slice of the job? What's like your main passion after going through and seeing this in so many different places?
I don't know if I have one particular passion, but certain things and I'm always trying to make that observation about myself. Like, what do I love? What's my
Yeah.
passion? I'm still gonna grow up one day and figure that out. So that day hasn't come yet. So, but definitely, I know I enjoy working with the teams and having that, as I said, building teams, the team dynamic, and also like I've learned over the past few years that definitely also dealing with um, client and customers
Hmm.
and also being their advocates, being their champions, and because it goes with my um, interest of and my tendency to be more of a big picture individuals. Like I like to see how a program's shaping itself.
Hmm.
Where's it not working? Where's it working? Rather than being at the very detailed level of it.
Hmm.
But I'm happy to guide the individuals who are managing those details because I can then bring back the message of this is the objective, this is the vision, remind them what's going on and keep that vision going. So definitely I'm happiest when I'm surrounded with individuals uh, and that means um, it also connected to the fact that every individual that I have managed in a team, they're unique.
Hmm.
Sure, they're all very technically gifted, but at the end of the day, they are unique individuals,
Hmm.
and it comes down to with every one of them, I had to build a relationship.
And,
So, and no relationship is unique.
no, and it sounds like you've done the hard work, right? Like you spent the time actually doing the relationship building, which I think for many people is probably the most challenging part because people are not one or zero. It's not a yes or no. It's not black or white. Like you've got to figure out how to build, like you said, that unique relationship. Did you do training along the way? Did you learn this like trial by fire? How did you figure out to do the things that are not taught in engineering school? Like obviously a director, you're thinking about money, you're thinking about customer relationships, schedules. I mean, we do a little bit of that in engineering school, and you learn a bit of that as an engineer and a manager. But did you do training? Did you learn it by trial? Did you have a manager? What got you from point A to point B where you're able to rock and roll with that?
I, I wish there was, I mean, there was something that I could take at some point, and in terms of training, and I am here 20 plus years in the field, mostly because of what I have observed,
Mm-hmm.
what I have seen from good managers
Yep.
and not so good
Yeah.
managers. So, and we're surrounded by people that we agree with how they lead and manage, and there's some that we don't entirely agree. So it's been a lot of trial and mistakes, failures, and learning from those failures. Learning like this conversation didn't go very well, and I could have handled it better. What do I do next time? How do I move forward in the future? So definitely what has helped me all along is empathy, and I never um, forgot about being an individual contributor because it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter if you're a manager or a director unless like even in your role you are functioning as an individual contributor. There are certain things that you do and you got to get it done, and you wear different hats throughout the day. So I still have to be an individual contributor before I can lead a team,
Mm-hmm.
lead a group of people. So I haven't forgotten about that, and I've always kept that close to my heart that there are challenges that the team has been dealing with. Just because I'm not worrying about that analysis directly, but when they hit an obstacle and there is a challenge, I'm here. Come to me. Let's figure it out together. So I'm still involved with, have been involved with those aspects of the work, and I think empathy has been something that um, definitely we can learn.
Mm-hmm.
It's a learned skill, but I have learned that it's critical aspect of what I do throughout the day.
I think it's potentially a superpower of just being a good leader, both with your team, other leaders, and then also your customer, right? Being able to put someone, I mean, it's a fundamental part of being a good human being, I think, as well. But in a company where there's lots of tension between getting something done and doing the right way and people's individual priorities and the bigger picture, like understanding the perspective of the other person is huge. You talked a little bit about, that working well for the team you're mentoring. But then when you think about it as a leader for yourself, you talked about sponsors and champions and people to help you get the bigger initiatives over the line. How did you use empathy and sort of that relationship building to help you build that little group that said, okay, hey, we're thinking about this bigger change. Maybe it's a new technology or a new product pitch or the big, above the trees, like you said. How did you use those relationships to kind of build, that momentum to actually make a change happen? Because oftentimes in engineering, it's a lot easier to just stay the way things are. How did you use people, relationships to kind of make that work?
So relationships means building trust, and trust is critical in everyday negotiations that we do. We in our jobs negotiate constantly internally with our team members. We negotiate with our clients and customers, and think about like any of these situations. If you don't have trust built,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to take a step. You're not going to initiate anything, especially if it's something out of ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been through situations that here's a very, you know, standard product development process in thinking, okay, I want to inject something else into it. I want to bring in more usability, formative usability in the beginning. What do I do that? Well, it's going to cost more money.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to cost extra time. How do we do that? So it was really a matter of having sponsors in the organization to who had witnessed me in the past to um, release other products into the market, and so at least I had that relationship. That's sort of like a here, she's done it, she can do it. But now I'm convincing them,
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, we can do better.
Mm-hmm.
We can do, here's the logic, and let's negotiate around this and see how we can implement a different process, because at the end of the day, it's going to be more beneficial for the end user and commercially for the organization. So again, I like to think that sure there's human factors and industrial designers and human factors engineers get involved with that, but there's another level of human factors that we deal with all day, negotiating with people all around.
and 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 none of us are fully qualified. I think in the entire planet, everyone's still learning on how to do that best. But I think what you just said is actually really interesting. You spoke a moment ago about seeing the big picture, being that practice leader, thinking about using empathy and then building trust. But I think in what you talked about negotiation, empathy is almost just as important there as the trust is, because you need to really put yourself in their shoes as to why they even want to listen, right? Why are they even considering making a change to PD, which could have a risk or it could derail one of their priorities? I think that's a really important factor that most times we go and just kind of tell. And the really good leaders, I think, actually start to ask themselves, why would this person actually care? And why would they actually want to be a sponsor and champion and build it together, right? It's a shared vision then. It's something we've seen that's very powerful. But I liked how you said that. You kind of led in with the empathy, which made you a good leader, and the trust, which helped you get it done. But really, it sounds like it's a bit of a paired effect of kind of bringing those two things together. Um, One of the things I'm curious about when you look at like those relationships and those changes, you talked about negotiating and putting together these business cases. How did you do that in a way that was productive for everybody involved? I see lots of times when you talk about like negotiating the business case, it gets right down in the numbers of an ROI on something that truthfully nobody really knows the math. Like it's going to be a made up ROI no matter what. How did you think about positioning the value and getting people on the same page? What worked for you in those cases?
I think numbers are still talk. I mean, in any of these negotiations, I mean, I'm going to go back to the example I gave on the product development. Sure, there at the end of that process, yes, it was going to be um, extra expense and cost to the organization, but down the road, there would have been a better return on investment. There would have been happier and more satisfied users and customers and patients at the end of the day. And that means better business.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what's important to do is to, in these type of negotiations, to quantify what we're trying to achieve. And that if it's a business negotiation, good or bad, it comes down to dollar sign, to values. I mean, is the company saving? Are they gaining? And is this leading to employee
Mm-hmm.
satisfaction? Is this, are we changing the process because our employees are going to have a better experience going through this
Mm-hmm.
process. And somebody's going to say, well, what's the return on investment? Well, you know what? You're going to have happy employees who are going to want to stay within your organization, and they're going to be productive, and they're happy, and they're going to bring their friends
Yeah.
over, and they're going to be, building even a stronger organization. So there are so many ways that we can look at the business benefits of these discussions.
Mm-hmm.
And again, with empathy, we got to think about what the other person is thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Turn the table around. Where the other hat? It's like, okay, listening to, like, and I'm sure you face that all the time in your organization. Somebody if a different department has an idea,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to convince you, but they have to think from your perspective, and hopefully they've presented that argument from your
Mm-hmm.
perspective, so that you can say, yes, I want this, approved.
Yeah, no, I love like that mindset. Like one of the things I think a lot of times people struggle with is being able to really clearly articulate what success is going to look like and why. Because you're gonna face challenges when you try to go in and inject something new into an industry where realistically there is a lot of risk. Getting it wrong has real consequences. You talked about space, medical. There's not a lot of room for error there, so the tolerance for risk is pretty low. I think being able to like really clearly spell that out from their perspective is the key. I think I've seen lots of business cases that are cool from my perspective, like if I'm the one making it, but at the end of the day, I'm not the one maybe making that final call, and I need someone else to understand it, and I need to speak their language. So I really like that takeaway. If you were thinking about 20 years ago, you're getting into your first leadership role, your first career choice. You talked a little bit about doing something you love, the title not totally mattering. Thinking about the difference between these roles. What would be your number one piece of advice to yourself if you were to go back and say, "Hey, throw all the things out, take all the things I learned. What's actually the most important thing you would have told yourself about engineering leadership?"
um it's I think another way of to answer that is like, would I have
Yeah.
changed anything, right? It's like what would I so I would have definitely told myself, stay patient.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't, but unintentionally, I ended up having champions in organizations for myself. So what I tell a lot of younger engineers, just entering the industry, I tell them, have mentors. Great, awesome. I mentor. I have
Mm-hmm.
mentors. It's fantastic. That's not the only key. You need champions. You need sponsors in the organization. So I happen to, always in every organization, having one or two people who, um, watched my performance from somewhere, from a different angle, and they were my champions, and even more recently in the past few years. So wouldn't that be great if we could create those sponsors and
Mm-hmm.
champions more proactively for ourselves? And sometimes it's difficult because we don't sure who to reach, and who that right person is. And sometimes it's someone very
Mm-hmm.
unexpected. But I think that's the key. That would be one advice for myself. It's like, find, go Layla, find mentors, but look for someone who is going to drop your name when it's required.
Mm-hmm.
When they see it, opportunity showing up, that's going to say, ah, I can think of Layla who can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my advice, for a lot of individuals. Doesn't matter where they are in their career right now. When you're out of school,
Mm-hmm.
25 years out of school, it doesn't matter. It's never too late to have that champion and
You,
sponsor who's going to have your
you
back.
never know when it's going to pay off either, right? It might be you help that person out down the road. They might help you out. A new company starts, a new role starts, a new program starts. You never really know. What if once you find those people? I think oftentimes the first step is mapping out who and why. Like if you're trying to become a technical SME, you're probably looking at a different set of people than someone maybe you really admire and you want to get in supply chain. But once you find them, you talked about empathy and trust. What are like the key things you can do as someone who's maybe early on in their career to actually build that trust? There's a lot of stuff you can do directly, but what are like, is it delivering results? Is it communication? What do you see as kind of the key for building trust with those sponsors and champions while you're working?
Um, Definitely they have to. I want to say they don't need to go beyond their
Mm-hmm.
performance, like do well as an individual contributor.
Mm-hmm.
But when there are opportunities to meet people, I mean, a lot of organizations these days, they have lunch and meet a leadership team member. Go to those
Mm-hmm.
events. I can assure you, a lot of leadership members have open door policy, and they're happy to someone say, "Hey, can I have coffee with you? A virtual
Yeah.
one? 20 minutes. I just want to chat with you." So it's networking at work, which these days has totally
Yeah.
changed with the pandemic. We can look, you and I talking from two different ends of the country, and that's fabulous. And it doesn't stop us from reaching out. And yes, it's very overwhelming to go to the CFO or the COO or the C, like it doesn't matter who you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to reach. It could be quite daunting, but network, reach out. If there are events, you go to your corporate holiday
Mm-hmm.
event, go and, you know, shake hands and chat, and maybe it's a 2-minute conversation, but network at work and not just outside of
I
work.
think it comes down somewhat to like just shooting your shot, right? The worst that's going to happen is someone says they don't answer or they don't have time. But it's not, no, people expect this. I actually had two different employees start in the last 3 weeks, and they each individually reached out to me after I welcomed them to the team and said, "Hey, could I grab 20 or 30 minutes to just meet, like just to be able to meet you, learn a bit about what you're interested in, understand more about the company." But I think the value for them is that they took some nuggets from that when they go to do their next project, maybe it's a development project, they'll know a little bit about why we did this. The why, like we talked at the very beginning, there's the how, which is like, how do I fix this problem? And then the why, like why am I even doing this problem? I think you learn a little bit of that too. So even just outside of the sponsoring and the champions, you just get a whole different set of perspective, which then makes you a better leader too, because you can make those bigger picture decisions. So I think it all ties back together in a beautiful kind of way. Um, Layla, this was awesome. I really, really appreciate it. And I think there's so much to take from that in terms of just like the differences in these roles. Think about your growth, really focusing on empathy, trust, relationships, networking at work. I'll take that one as a tagline for this. But I really appreciate the time and wish you all the best in whatever comes next at your current role, future, all the people you're going to help along the road. Thank you for doing what you do, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. I had a blast. This was a great conversation, and this, you asked me what I like to do. This is one of the things I like to do, like reaching out to people. And I don't know how many people this is going to reach out to, but I hope that even if someone walks away with one nugget of thing, oh, I like that, and it sort of like validates that they're on the right
Mhm.
track or they need to change their trajectory, mission accomplished.
I,
I'm
I
happy. So.
absolutely love that. That is amazing. That's a wrap.